Welcome to 30 What Now, podcast dedicated to millennials figuring that shit out. This is your host, Melissa Tan. Welcome to episode 2 of my limited podcast series. Now, if you're on YouTube, you'll notice I'm wearing the same corgi shirt, and that's because I planned episode 1 and 2 together, and I'm recording it on the same day. So I'm hoping that my mouth doesn't get tired. Do you know if you talk too much, especially when you're talking on your own, I guess in this podcasting on your own, your mouth gets really tired, and I can feel my mouth being tired now because obviously, apart from recording a podcast, sometimes you practice and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, my mouth is a bit tired, so I'm hoping that I don't sound bad at the end of this episode. But today, I'm going to be talking about something that I have not heard before, but it seems to be kind of relevant, especially if you're in your 30s, and I guess maybe if you're a woman, we'll talk to that a little bit more in the episode. But I'm talking about that quiet sadness, that feeling of familiar hurt, and the need and maybe even want of being liked but not chosen. This episode is a concept called micro-rejection fatigue, and it's about why it shows up now in your 30s and about how big moments such as weddings make it a lot sharper, and how to reframe what's happening so we don't turn the pain inward. So if you ever thought, why does this particular rejection hurt so much when it's such a small rejection from my friends? Or why do I always feel like I care more than my friends? Or why don't I matter to my friends? And this episode might be for you. So let's start with something really important, right? You're not emotional when you feel rejected. It's actually quite a biological feeling. Neuroscience research actually shows that when we experience social rejection or exclusion, the brain activates the same region that's involved in physical pain. So and I guess that's the same with all heartbreak. When you feel hurt inside, your body actually feels it too, and it doesn't actually notice the difference between an internal emotional pain versus a physical pain. So it basically processes rejection the same way as an injury. So when you feel that ache in your chest or that lack of energy, or that feeling of being left out and you're flat or not prioritized, that's on your head. That's what your nervous system telling you what it was evolved, that's your nervous system doing exactly what it was evolved to do. Rejection is an action that threatens the act of belonging. You don't feel like you belong to a particular group or somewhere or anywhere, so belonging, it's tied to survival. So when you are built to ensure your own safety, telling yourself, I don't have, just not to care about that rejection just does not work. So what micro-rejection fatigue really is. Now, it is a made-up term, but I think the concept stands, right? Micro-rejection fatigue isn't about that big rejection, I don't want to be friends with you, no more rejection. It's about all the small ones. It's when you are the one who initiates most of the time, who's being included, but you're not prioritized, who's always emotionally available, but then you're not met with the same vulnerability. It's when you are important, but you're not important enough. So each moment, it's subtle, it's explainable, it's polite, it's so easy to minimize, but your body, your nervous system, it keeps the score as per a very famous book out there. And over time, the story in your head shifts from, I want closeness to I shouldn't be expected to be chosen. From I want to feel important to my friend to why do I even deserve to feel important? From I can't wait to share this or to share this next part of my life with my friends to would they even care? And that shift, that constant shift is the fatigue. And it often shows up as sadness, not anger, because it is a type of grief. And why, to me, I did ask, why do I feel it now? Is it because I'm in my 30s? But the reality is your 30s are the perfect storm for this. In your 20s, friendships are built on proximity and availability. Everyone is living, not in the city, or near the city, or they're working around the city, or they're keen to hang out around out of town catching up over cocktails or drinks or coffees and adventures, and there is no limitation. But then in your 30s, friendships are now shaped by responsibility and capacity. Careers flourish, partnerships solidify, energy becomes scarce. And then on top of that, research have shown that people who are generally socially connected can feel more distressed because they are feel more distressed when they're excluded from a particular moment. I guess, that's probably because they're more attuned to relational cues, to social cues. So if you're someone who values the depth that you can get from each relationship, and you notice the slightest emotional shift, and you invest intentionally, you're gonna feel the rejection more. And that's not because you're fragile, because that's what I keep telling myself, but that's because you are perceptive. You can feel the energy shift between you and your friend. You can feel the energy shift from them, even when they're not saying anything outward. And then weddings or big life moments that happen in your 30s become the ultimate emotional trigger. So what prompted this fatigue that I myself am feeling? Well, I guess for me, I think it's always been there. I think as someone who, I obviously I'm biased, but who invests intentionally and deeply in everything, I've always had this feeling. I've had numerous micro-rejections over my life, and I've never really thought much of it. I think I was sad every once in a while, but this big life event, this unplanned upcoming wedding of mine, really did trigger me recently. So I had a couple of quite a fair bit of micro rejections that made me really upset, and for a long time I really had no idea why, because it's not as if all these rejections were done out of spite. Like, they were quite polite, they were very well-meaning, but they still hurt. I've been told that big life moments like planning for a wedding or like having kids in the future and stuff, they act as this relationship x-ray, because they reveal who would step forward when you need them, who hesitates, who makes you doubt the closeness of your friendship, who stays on the edge, and then who quietly opts out. Big life moments stirs up an unconscious question: who is willing to be there when it really matters? When someone doesn't show up the way that you imagine, it stops you in your track, because it makes you question whether they value you as much as you value them. And so the dangerous story that the mind tells you is, when rejection happens over and over again, the brain looks for the simplest story, is what a good friend of mine, Vic, said. And the simplest story here, for me at least, is self-blame. It's that I'm the one that cares more, even though maybe I shouldn't have, or maybe it's more like I'm not important enough, or there's something wrong with me, or I haven't done enough. And there's this thing that's also called like the rejection sensitivity. And it's basically, it shows that people who internalize rejections are more likely to experience anxiety, depression, and loneliness over time. And that's because rejections mean a lot more to them. It's not a small little blip in the day. It actually weighs a lot more. That rejection, especially when it comes from such a close friend, shatters a perception of, shatters their image of what their friendship is meant to be. So as someone who deeply internalizes rejections, what do we do? There's strong psychological research on something called cognitive reappraisal, and that's a fancy term of how we reframe meaning. And obviously I'm not a psychologist, these are all just things I found online, right? But it shows that people who can reinterpret social setbacks in a non-self-blaming way have more ability to maintain stable self-esteem, who can recover faster from relationship disappointment, and who can experience less long-term emotional fallout. So reframing obviously doesn't mean lying to yourself. It just means choosing an explanation that doesn't harm you. For me though, I know reframing is a fancy word, but I like the word delulu, which is obviously quite an old term, but because I'm a millennial, I'm just going to use the terms that I learned. But you know when people say delulu is the salulu? So I think I like to use the word delulu most. I think the more delulu, here's the thing I need to be more delulu about, which is what does rejection actually mean to me? Because instead of reframing rejection as I wasn't chosen because because I'm not important, I would love my delulu reprisal to sound like, I guess they just don't have time for me. And it's not about me, it's about them. That shift actually protects your nervous system. So there are actually a few reframes, few delulu salulus that are grounded in both psychology and compassion. Like, name the fatigue, not the flaw. Like, the pain that you experience is accumulated grief. It's not evidence that I'm not unlovable, which sometimes I do feel that, especially when I get all these microrejections. Anyway, next. Capacity of a character. It's like people still care for me, even though they don't have the time to show up. But, but something that I am mulling more about, maybe because I'm petty, is this thing called the friendship mutuality check, which is, if I stopped trying so hard, would this relationship exist? And if the answer is no, that's information about the relationship, not the failure of that relationship. So, and more so, it's probably about that relationship's boundary. So if you have a different boundary or expectation of that relationship, it's up to you to then decide whether you want to move the dial on your boundary. Now, on that topic, I was told to include this segment called Smart Things That My Fiancé says that is quite smart and I should tell people. When I was talking to him about this deep sadness that I feel from all this micro-rejection from friends, he did query, is it because I see friendships in a more transactional manner than I guess he does? And so when an effort or closeness is not reciprocated, it hurts deeper. Now, I do want to unpack the concept a little bit myself before I actually talk to you guys more, because I do believe that what he says is correct. As my family, I think they treat relationships in more a transactional manner, but I feel like I have been bought into that fairy tale that when someone scratches your back, when you scratch someone's back, they scratch you back, right? So that's friendship. So I don't know, when other people are showing up for other people's big events, I do ask myself, why won't mine do that for me? Obviously, I'm not talking about all of my friends, because there's so many people that are actually showing up more than I thought they would. But then I think the ones that I thought mattered didn't. And then when I go down this rabbit hole of thinking that maybe, I'm not a good enough friend, and then will I ever be good enough? And yeah, this is when I need to reframe my mind, because if what's happening shows to me what their boundary of the friendship is, then it's up to me to decide what is my boundary of that friendship, right? Because the other thing here is that I think I do try to protect myself a lot from emotional hurt, and I'm quite surprised that this sort of baggage didn't show up in my romantic relationship. Maybe it did, I don't know. But I do have this tendency to pull away from people once I know where they're at. I guess I'm also working on that, but yeah, it's surprising how I don't have any commitment issues. But maybe we'll talk into, I don't think I'm talking about commitment issues. I do think there's a little bit of reframing in my head about how I see friendships, and whether the way that my family brought me up, do I see friendships in more transactional manner? Is that why I have different expectation of friends? Or is it because I just suck as a friend? Things that I'm still working on. So, I think we're at the end of our topic. If there's one thing you can take from this episode, it's this: like, if you experience micro-rejection fatigue, even though the term is a made-up term, your sadness, I understand. It's not proof that something is wrong with you. It's not proof that you're not a good friend. It's not proof that you are unlovable. It's proof that you do value connection, and maybe you invest a little bit deeper than the people around you, and you're open for these like deep, meaningful connections. It is probably a way for you to, it's probably a time for you to assess your current friendship and whether it is time to change your boundary or change the expectation on some of your friends. Because if Ashley Tisdale can have this big article about leaving a mom group and have this big revelation that it's okay, you can probably have a different expectation of your friendship group too. Yeah, but it's hard. I think, I don't know, for me it's funny, like, given all this big moment of planning a wedding, I never wanted to be a bridezilla, and I don't think I am. But because of all this micro-rejection fatigue sort of like hurt that I've received from my friends, I did say to my fiance, I'm like, I'd rather just elope because I'm scared of feeling more hurt by other people who don't show up, by other friends who don't show up. Like, to me, it's the most important thing is the celebration of our love, and I wouldn't want that fear and that sadness to overpower that. And then he obviously, the smart things that my fiance says, like, so you're taking away the opportunities for your friends to show up. And I'm like, yeah, because at least then I won't feel hurt. I know, it's a lot. I'm still working through it. Realistically, this pain that's popped up actually only happened a couple of days ago, so I'm working through it. But it did prompt me to talk about how, like, I'm sure there are other people out there who might feel the same. I mean, maybe there isn't. Maybe there is. If you're out there and you understand that feeling, can you reach out so I don't feel like I'm a crazy person? But yeah, for those of you in your 30s, if a big moment like this if a big moment like similar to this has caused you to feel some form of fatigue from all these micro-rejection from your friends, definitely reach out and we can talk about it. I do feel a little better about it a couple of days after, so hopefully by then I'm able to help reframe some of your thinking for you. Anyway, I think that's all from me. Oh wait, I did draft more in my episode than I thought. So let me continue. Micro-rejection fatigue, it doesn't actually mean that you should care less, even though it does make you want to care less sometimes. It means that you may need to care more wisely. Maybe it's time to focus on fewer, more meaningful friends, which is probably what I'm thinking. Find the ones who are more willing to show reciprocity and those who causes you to have less self-blame. And so this is probably the proper final couple words. So for all the 30-year-old out there who are going through some form of friendship rejections, be gentle with yourself, because your body and your nervous system is working really hard to protect you. And since I'm here and since I've brought this up, if you really need another person to hear out your problems, I can be there to help protect you as well. Thank you for listening, and I guess be gentle with yourself out there. Bye.